Admiral Zephyr Kane stood on the bridge of the ESS Indomitable, watching the swirling blue-green marble of Earth grow larger in the viewport. The massive dreadnought hummed with barely contained energy, its quantum drives pushing the vessel through the void at speeds that would have been impossible just 50 years ago. Around them, the Earth defense fleet spread out in perfect formation, 200 ships of various classes, from nimble destroyers to massive battlecruisers, each one a testament to human engineering and determination. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the Galactic Empire fleet," reported Commander Sarah Chun from the communications station. Her voice carried a slight tremor, though whether from fear or excitement, Kane couldn't tell. "Put it through," Kane replied, straightening his uniform. The main screen flickered, revealing the alien visage of what appeared to be the enemy commander. The being had 4 arms, crystalline skin that seemed to shimmer with internal light, and eyes like burning coals. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in perfect English, though the tone remained cold and mechanical. "Primitive species of the 3rd planet," the alien commander began, its voice echoing through the bridge. "I am Supreme War Marshal Vexthara of the Galactic Empire's 7th Conquest Fleet. You have been selected for assimilation into our glorious empire. Surrender your vessels immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Resistance will only prolong your suffering." Kane studied the alien's face for a moment before responding. In the background, he could see the Empire's fleet, over 1,000 ships arranged in precise geometric patterns that spoke of military discipline spanning millennia. Their vessels were elegant, organic-looking things that seemed grown rather than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "War Marshal Vexthara," Kane said calmly. "I am Admiral Zephyr Kane of the Earth Defense Forces. Thank you for the introduction, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline your generous offer of enslavement. You see, we humans have this peculiar habit of fighting for our freedom, no matter the odds." The alien's expression shifted slightly, what might have been amusement flickering across its features. "Your bravery is noted, Admiral Kane, but ultimately futile. Our records show that your species has only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Your technology is primitive, your tactics rudimentary. We have conquered 10,000 worlds across the galaxy. What makes you believe you can stand against us?" Kane smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "Because, War Marshal, you've made the same mistake that every other would-be conqueror has made throughout human history. You underestimated us." The transmission cut off abruptly, and Kane turned to address his bridge crew. "All stations, report readiness status." "Weapons systems online and charged," called out Lieutenant Torres from the tactical station. "Kinetic barriers at maximum strength." "Engine room reports all drives operating within normal parameters," added Chief Engineer Murphy over the comm system. "We're ready to give these bastards hell, Admiral." "Fighter squadrons are launched and in formation," reported Squadron Leader Jackson. "All pilots report ready for engagement." Kane nodded, feeling the familiar calm that always settled over him before battle. Around the bridge, his crew moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role in the deadly dance that was about to begin. These men and women had trained for this moment their entire careers, ever since humanity had first detected the Empire's expansion toward their corner of the galaxy 5 years ago. The Empire fleet began to move, their formation shifting like a living organism. Kane watched their approach with professional interest, noting their tactics and deployment patterns. They moved with the confidence of a force that had never known defeat, their ships spreading out in a classic envelopment pattern designed to surround and crush their opponents. "Interesting," Kane murmured. "They're using Doctrine Theta 7, straight out of the Imperial military handbooks we captured from their border skirmishes. No innovation, no adaptation to our specific capabilities." Commander Chen looked up from her station with surprise. "Sir, how do you know their doctrine designations?" Kane's smile widened slightly. "Because, Commander, we've been studying them for 5 years. Every engagement they've fought, every tactical manual we could steal or purchase from neutral traders, every piece of intelligence our deep cover operatives could gather. We know how they think, how they fight, and, most importantly, how they fail." The Empire fleet was now close enough that individual ships could be clearly seen on the tactical display. Their largest vessels were truly massive, dwarfing even Earth's biggest dreadnoughts. Bioluminescent patterns rippled across their hulls in hypnotic waves, and weapon ports began to glow with ominous energy. "Admiral," Lieutenant Torres called out urgently. "They're charging their primary weapons. Energy readings are off the charts. Those are planet killers, sir." "As expected," Kane replied calmly. "All ships, execute formation Delta 9. Time to show our guests what human ingenuity looks like." The Earth fleet began to move, but not in any pattern the Empire forces would recognize. Instead of meeting them head-on or attempting to flee, the human ships scattered in what appeared to be complete chaos. Destroyers broke from formation and accelerated at impossible angles, while the larger vessels seemed to simply disappear from sensors entirely. On the Empire flagship, War Marshal Vexthera watched the human response with growing confusion. "What are they doing? This is not a recognized tactical formation." "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "our targeting systems are having difficulty maintaining locks. The human vessels appear to be using some form of advanced stealth technology." Vexthera's forearms gestured dismissively. "Impossible. Our intelligence reports indicated they barely possessed basic spacefaring technology. Begin the assault. Target the largest concentrations of ships and fire at will." The Empire fleet opened fire, their energy weapons lancing through space in brilliant displays of destructive power. But their shots found empty void where targets should have been. The human ships had vanished like ghosts, leaving only empty space and confused alien gunners. "Where did they go?" Vexthera demanded, his voice rising in pitch with frustration. The answer came in the form of a massive explosion that rocked the Empire's left flank. 3 of their heavy cruisers simply ceased to exist, vaporized by weapons fire that seemed to come from nowhere. Then, another explosion, this one taking out a cluster of destroyers on the right side of their formation. "Report," Vexthera screamed, his crystalline skin now flashing angry red patterns. "Sir, we're detecting massive kinetic impacts, but we can't locate the source. It's as if the humans have become invisible." What the Empire forces didn't understand was that the human ships hadn't become invisible. They had become ghosts in the machine. Years of studying Empire sensor technology had allowed Earth scientists to develop countermeasures that rendered their vessels nearly undetectable at long range. Combined with revolutionary new propulsion systems that left minimal energy signatures, the human fleet could appear and disappear at will, striking like phantoms before melting back into the void. The battle continued for hours, with the Empire forces growing increasingly desperate as their ships were picked off one by one. Every time they tried to focus fire on a human vessel, it would vanish, only to reappear somewhere else and deliver a devastating blow to their formation. The aliens had never encountered anything like it in their millennia of conquest. "This is impossible," Vexthera raged, watching another of his battleships explode under concentrated human fire. "How are they doing this?" His tactical officer looked up from his station with an expression of growing dread. "Sir, I believe we may have seriously underestimated the humans' capabilities. Our losses are approaching 30%, while we haven't confirmed a single enemy kill." As if to punctuate his words, the Empire flagship suddenly shuddered as something massive struck its shields. Alarms began blaring throughout the bridge as damage reports flooded in from all sections. "What was that?" Vexthera demanded. "Direct hit from what appears to be a kinetic projectile traveling at 0.87 light speed," the damage control officer reported. "Shields are down to 60%. Sir, I don't understand how they managed to accelerate solid matter to that velocity." Vexthera stared at the tactical display, watching his grand fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy he couldn't even see properly. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. The legends spoke of a species from the rim worlds that fought like demons, that refused to yield even when faced with impossible odds. He had dismissed such stories as primitive superstition, the fantasies of lesser species trying to make sense of their inevitable defeat. But, as he watched his ships burn in the void around a small blue planet, Vexthera began to understand that some legends were born from terrible truth. The humans weren't just fighting, they were hunting. And, for the first time in the Galactic Empire's history, they were the ones being hunted. The ESS Prometheus materialized from the void like a nightmare-given form, its hull scarred and battle-worn but bristling with weapons that defied conventional understanding. Captain Maria Santos felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as her ship dropped out of stealth mode directly behind a cluster of Empire destroyers. The aliens barely had time to register the human vessel's presence before the Prometheus opened fire. Target-rich environment, announced her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Park. Multiple contacts, all enemy, all unaware of our position. Light them up, Santos ordered coldly. The Prometheus unleashed hell. Its primary weapons weren't energy-based like the Empire's elegant beam arrays, but something far more primitive and infinitely more terrifying. Electromagnetically accelerated projectiles, simple chunks of dense metal, screamed through space at velocities that turned them into relativistic weapons of mass destruction. The first Empire destroyer simply disintegrated as a tungsten rod punched through its hull at 90% light speed. The kinetic energy release was so massive that the explosion looked like a miniature star being born and dying in the span of seconds. The second ship managed to turn toward the threat before a spread of smaller projectiles shredded its engines and life support systems. "Sir," called out Navigator Williams from his station, receiving tactical data from Admiral Kane. "The Empire's main battle group is regrouping near the asteroid belt. They're trying to use the rocks as cover." Santos smiled grimly. "Clever. Too bad for them. We spent the last 3 years mining those asteroids and turning them into something special. Helm, set course for coordinates 77 Alpha. Time to show these invaders what human engineering can really do." As the Prometheus accelerated toward the asteroid belt, Santos reflected on the path that had led them to this moment. The first contact with the Galactic Empire had come 5 years ago, when a lone scout ship had stumbled into the outer edges of the solar system. The alien crew had been arrogant, dismissive, treating humanity like children who had somehow learned to play with fire. They had demanded immediate surrender, claiming that resistance was futile against the might of an empire that spanned half the galaxy. They had laughed at human technology, calling their ships crude metal boxes held together by desperation and ignorance. They had been so confident in their superiority that they had transmitted detailed tactical manuals and technical specifications, apparently believing that humans would be too primitive to understand them. They had been catastrophically wrong. Humanity's greatest strength had always been adaptation. Where other species might have panicked or surrendered in the face of such overwhelming technological superiority, humans had done what they did best. They had learned, improved, and innovated. Every piece of Empire technology became a puzzle to solve, every tactical doctrine a challenge to overcome. The asteroid belt came into view on the main screen, and Santos could see the Empire ships moving between the massive rocks, clearly believing they had found a defensive position. Their formation was textbook perfect, with overlapping fields of fire and sensor coverage. It would have been an excellent strategy against any conventional enemy. "All stations, prepare for Operation Hammerfall," Santos announced. "Remember, we only get one shot at this." Deep within the largest asteroids, systems that had been dormant for months suddenly came online. Fusion reactors began warming up, and massive electromagnetic coils started building charge. The rocks that the Empire forces thought would provide them cover were about to become weapons beyond their worst nightmares. "This is asteroid control to all fleet units," came a voice over the comm system. "Hammerfall is green. Repeat, Hammerfall is green. Fire in the hole." The asteroids began to move. To the Empire forces, it must have seemed like the laws of physics had suddenly ceased to function. Massive chunks of rock and metal, some the size of small moons, began accelerating directly toward their fleet. What they didn't realize was that human engineers had spent years hollowing out the largest asteroids and installing drive systems powerful enough to turn them into kinetic missiles. "What is happening?" War Marshal Vexterod demanded from his flagship bridge, watching in horror as mountains of stone bore down on his fleet. "Asteroids do not move on their own." His science officer's voice was barely above a whisper. "Sir, we're detecting massive artificial gravity fields." The humans have somehow weaponized the asteroid belt itself. The first asteroid strike hit the Empire's left flank with the force of a small planet. The explosion was visible from Earth orbit, a flash of light that briefly outshone the sun. When the energy dissipated, an entire squadron of Empire vessels had simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the impact. But that was only the beginning. Santos watched from the Prometheus as more asteroids began their deadly dance through the Empire formation. Each one had been carefully prepared, fitted with guidance systems, and protected by fields that would prevent them from being easily destroyed by energy weapons. The Empire forces tried desperately to shoot them down, but their elegant beam weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat, not for destroying massive chunks of rock moving at interplanetary velocities. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Park reported with barely contained excitement, "the Empire's third battle group just lost their flagship. Direct asteroid impact to their command section." "Excellent," Santos replied. "Signal all fleet units. Begin Phase 2 of the operation. Time to show them what happens when you corner a species that learned to fight by surviving ice ages and asteroid impacts." As if responding to her words, human ships began to decloak throughout the system. They emerged from behind moons, from within the asteroid field itself, from deep space trajectories that had hidden them from Empire sensors. Hundreds of vessels, each one a masterpiece of human engineering and determination. The Empire forces found themselves surrounded, trapped between the weaponized asteroids and a fleet that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Human tactics were chaotic, unpredictable, born from a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history fighting for survival against impossible odds. Where Empire doctrine called for organized battle lines and coordinated maneuvers, humans swarmed like angry hornets, each ship operating independently while somehow maintaining perfect coordination. Their weapons were crude but devastatingly effective, turning the elegant technology of the Empire into twisted wreckage. "Status report," Vexthera called out, his voice now noticeably strained. "Sir, we've lost 40% of the fleet," his tactical officer reported. "Morale is beginning to break down among the forward squadrons. Several ships are requesting permission to withdraw." Vexthera's crystalline skin flashed patterns of rage and disbelief. In 3,000 years of Imperial expansion, no enemy had ever inflicted such casualties on an Empire fleet. These humans were supposed to be primitive, barely capable of space flight, yet they were systematically dismantling his forces with weapons and tactics that defied everything he understood about warfare. "Sir," the communications officer called out urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from the human admiral." "Put it through," Vexthera ordered, desperate for any chance to understand his enemy. Admiral Kane's face appeared on the screen, his expression calm despite the battle raging around his ship. "War Marshal Vexthera, I trust you're beginning to understand why we declined your kind offer of surrender." "This is impossible," Vexthera snarled. "Your species is barely out of its home system. How do you possess such capabilities?" Kane's smile was cold as space itself. "You want to know our secret, War Marshal? It's simple. You see, your empire has been so successful for so long that you've forgotten what it means to truly fight for survival. You've become comfortable, predictable, set in your ways. But humans? We've never had that luxury." On cue, another wave of human ships emerged from stealth, this time carrying weapons that Vexthera didn't recognize. They looked almost primitive compared to Empire technology, but when they fired, the results were anything but primitive. "We learned everything from you," Kane continued. "Every engagement you've fought, every tactical manual you've written, every piece of technology you've developed. We studied it all, and then we asked ourselves a simple question: how do we beat it?" The new human weapons fired, and Vexthera watched in shock as they seemed to ignore his ship's shields entirely, striking the hulls directly. His vessels began to buckle and collapse as if crushed by invisible hands. "Gravitational weapons," Kane explained almost casually. "Amazing what you can accomplish when you stop thinking about war as a gentleman's game and start treating it as a matter of survival." Vexthera realized with growing horror that the humans hadn't just been preparing for this battle. They had been preparing for this specific battle against this specific enemy, using this specific strategy. Every move his forces had made had been anticipated, every tactic countered before it could be fully deployed. The Empire had brought overwhelming force to crush a primitive species, but instead they had walked into a trap that had been 5 years in the making. And, as more human ships continued to emerge from hiding spots throughout the system, Vexthera began to understand that the battle was already over. The only question now was whether any of his ships would survive to carry word of this disaster back to the Empire. As another asteroid impact lit up the darkness, Vexthera realized that even that hope was fading fast. Commander Elena Vasquez gripped the controls of her fighter as she screamed through the debris field that had once been the Empire's vanguard. The ESS Razor's Edge was a marvel of human engineering, built specifically for one purpose: to get close enough to Empire ships to deliver a killing blow before they could react. "Razor Squadron, this is Razor Leader," she called out over the comm system. "Target is the Empire command ship, bearing 27 Mark IV. Intelligence indicates their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and large kinetic projectiles. Let's see how they handle a swarm of angry humans with fusion charges." Her squadron of 12 fighters acknowledged the order, their sleek vessels darting between the massive hulks of disabled Empire ships like deadly insects. Each fighter carried a payload that would have been unthinkable just decades ago: miniaturized fusion devices that could punch through the most advanced armor in the galaxy. But what made them truly terrifying wasn't their weapons. It was their pilots. Human fighter pilots were products of a warrior culture that had been refined through centuries of aerial combat. They thought in 3 dimensions, moved with instinctive grace, and possessed a level of spatial awareness that other species found almost supernatural. Where alien pilots relied on computer assistance and preset maneuvers, humans flew by feel, instinct, and raw aggression. "Contact front," called out Lieutenant Morrison from Razor 2. "Empire interceptors, 12 o'clock high." Vasquez smiled grimly as she spotted the alien fighters moving to intercept them. They were beautiful ships, all flowing curves and bioluminescent patterns, but they moved with the predictable precision that marked Empire technology. Perfect formations, textbook approaches, everything by the manual. "All units, engage at will," Vasquez ordered. "Remember your training. These pilots have never faced anything like us." The 2 fighter groups collided in a dance of death among the stars. The Empire pilots flew with mechanical precision, their movements calculated and efficient. But efficiency wasn't enough against opponents who had learned to fight in the chaotic skies above Earth, where survival meant adapting to conditions that changed by the second. Vasquez rolled her fighter into an impossible spiral, diving beneath an Empire interceptor's line of fire before pulling up behind it in a maneuver that should have torn her ship apart from the G-forces. Her targeting computer locked onto the alien vessel, and she fired a concentrated burst that punched through its rear shielding. Around her, the rest of Razor Squadron was proving why human pilots were already becoming legendary throughout known space. They flew like demons possessed, pulling maneuvers that defied conventional understanding of physics and fighter tactics. The Empire pilots, trained for millennia in perfect formation flying, found themselves completely outmatched by opponents who treated the rulebook as mere suggestions. "This is impossible," came a transmission from one of the Empire fighters, the universal translator rendering the pilots' words in panicked tones. "How are they moving like that? Their ships should have been torn apart by those accelerations." What the alien pilot didn't understand was that human engineers had solved the G-force problem years ago using technology reverse-engineered from Empire gravity systems. But where the Empire used their artificial gravity for comfort and convenience, humans had weaponized it, creating inertial dampening systems that allowed their fighters to pull maneuvers that would liquefy alien pilots. "Razor Leader to Razor Squadron," Vasquez called out as the last Empire interceptor exploded in a ball of plasma. "Path is clear. Moving to attack position on the command ship." The Empire flagship grew larger in her view screen as she approached. It was a magnificent vessel, easily 10 times the size of Earth's largest dreadnought, its hull covered in the same bioluminescent patterns that marked all Empire technology. Weapons ports along its flanks glowed with ominous energy, and Vasquez could see fighter bays opening to launch more interceptors. "Remember," she told her squadron as they formed up for their attack run. This ship has been the command center for 100 conquered worlds. Every species that tried to stand against the Empire saw their resistance die when ships like this arrived. Today, we change that history. The human fighters accelerated toward their target, their engines pushed beyond safe limits. Behind them, the battle for Earth raged across the solar system as Admiral Kane's fleet systematically dismantled the Empire forces. But Vasquez and her pilots had their own mission, to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. "Incoming fire," shouted Morrison as the flagship's point defense systems came online. Beams of coherent energy lanced through space around them, missing the wildly maneuvering human fighters by meters. Vasquez laughed as she threw her fighter into a barrel roll that took her directly between two energy beams. The Empire's targeting computers had been designed to track conventional fighters following predictable flight paths. They simply couldn't keep up with pilots who flew like their lives depended on it, because their lives did depend on it. "Fusion charges armed," reported Sergeant Kim from Razor 7, "ready to deliver some human hospitality to our uninvited guests." The fighters dove toward the Empire flagship like hawks stooping on prey. Their fusion charges would detonate against the ship's hull in a synchronized pattern designed to overload its defensive systems and create a chain reaction that would cripple the massive vessel. But as they closed the final distance, something unexpected happened. The flagship's main batteries, weapons designed to destroy planets, began to track their approach. Energy readings spiked off the charts as the massive guns prepared to fire directly at the approaching fighters. "Holy hell," whispered Lieutenant Torres from Razor 5. "They're willing to use planet killers on fighters. These guys really don't mess around." Vasquez felt ice form in her stomach as she realized what the Empire commander was planning. Those weapons would vaporize her entire squadron in a single shot, but they would also create an explosion visible from Earth orbit. The message would be clear. This was what happened to species that dared to resist the Empire. "All units, evasive maneuvers," she shouted, but she knew it was too late. The massive guns were already charging, their targeting systems locked onto the human fighters. Then, something impossible happened. A shadow fell across the Empire flagship as something massive moved between it and the attacking fighters. Vasquez looked up to see the hull of a human dreadnought passing overhead, so close she could make out the individual armor plates. "This is Admiral Kane to Razor Squadron," came a calm voice over the comm system. "Please continue your attack run. We'll handle the interruption." The human dreadnought opened fire with every weapon it possessed, not at the Empire's ship, but at something in space between them. For a moment, Vasquez couldn't understand what was happening. Then, she saw them, thousands of small objects spreading out from the dreadnought's hull like a metallic cloud. "Chaff deployment successful," reported someone from the dreadnought's bridge. "Empire targeting systems are confused. You have a clear run, Razor Squadron." The objects were more sophisticated than simple chaff. Each one was a miniature electronic warfare platform, broadcasting false signals and creating phantom targets that overwhelmed the Empire's targeting computers. The massive planet killer weapons fired, but their shots went wide, missing the human fighters entirely. Vasquez didn't waste the opportunity. She dove toward the Empire flagship's hull, her squadron following close behind. As they approached the optimal release point, she thought about all the species that had fallen to ships like this one. The Kalari, with their beautiful crystal cities. The Thuman, whose peaceful nature had made them easy prey. The Vortani, whose last message to the galaxy had been a warning about the Empire's approach. "For everyone who couldn't fight back," she whispered, and released her fusion charge. 12 miniature suns bloomed against the Empire flagship's hull as the human fighters completed their attack run. The explosions created a chain reaction that rippled along the massive ship's structure, overloading systems and causing secondary detonations throughout its interior. As Razor Squadron pulled away from the crippled flagship, Vasquez received a priority transmission from Admiral Kane. "Outstanding work, Commander." The Admiral's voice was filled with quiet satisfaction. "Empire Command is reporting that their flagship is heavily damaged and unable to continue operations. You and your pilots have just accomplished something that military theorists said was impossible, a successful fighter attack on an Empire capital ship." Vasquez looked back at the massive vessel, now dark and drifting, its bioluminescent patterns flickering and dying. Around them, the battle continued as human forces pressed their advantage against an enemy that had never learned what it meant to face opponents who refused to be conquered. "Sir," she replied, "permission to proceed to secondary targets. We're just getting started." Through her fighter's canopy, she could see Earth hanging in space like a blue jewel. It was a world that had spawned a species too stubborn to know when they were beaten, too clever to fight fair, and too determined to ever give up. The Empire had come expecting to add another conquest to their long list of victories. Instead, they had awakened something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. They had challenged humanity, and humanity was about to teach them why some species earned their place among the stars not through conquest, but through the will to remain free no matter the cost. War Marshal Vexthera stood amid the smoke and sparks of his flagship's bridge, watching his grand fleet die piece by piece on the tactical display. The pristine formation he had brought to this insignificant system was now a scattered collection of burning wrecks and desperate survivors. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like what these humans were capable of. "Status report," he demanded, though he already knew the answer would be catastrophic. "Sir," his tactical officer replied, voice shaking, "we've lost 68% of our fleet. The remaining ships are scattered across the system, most with critical damage. Our communications array is functioning at minimal capacity, and we've lost contact with the second and fourth battle groups entirely." Vexthera felt something cold settle in his stomach. Those battle groups represented over 300 ships and 50,000 personnel. The possibility that they had been completely destroyed was almost too horrific to contemplate. "What about our reinforcements? The Ninth Fleet should have received our distress signal by now." "Sir." The communications officer looked up with an expression of barely controlled panic. "We've been trying to reach them for the past 2 hours. All long-range communications are being jammed by some kind of interference field the humans have deployed around the system. We're completely cut off." The bridge fell silent except for the crackling of damaged systems and the distant rumble of explosions echoing through the hull. Vexthera realized with growing horror that the humans hadn't just prepared for battle. They had prepared for complete information warfare. His fleet was trapped, isolated, and being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. "Sir," called out the sensor operator, "we're detecting a massive energy buildup from the human fleet. It appears they're preparing some kind of coordinated attack." Through the main view screen, Vexthera could see the human ships moving into new positions throughout the system. Their formation was unlike anything in Empire tactical doctrine, a loose, seemingly chaotic arrangement that somehow managed to provide mutual support while maintaining maximum flexibility. Then, he saw something that made his blood run cold. "What is that?" he whispered, pointing at a massive structure that was rising from Earth's moon. His science officer frantically worked at his console before looking up with an expression of disbelief. "Sir, it appears to be some kind of weapon platform. Energy readings are unprecedented. Whatever it is, it's been hidden beneath the moon's surface." The structure continued to emerge, revealing itself to be a construction of staggering proportions. It was easily the size of a small space station, covered in arrays and emitters that hummed with barely contained power. As it rotated to face the Empire fleet, Vexthera could see that its entire purpose was focused on a single, massive weapon system pointing directly at his forces. "Unknown Empire vessel," came Admiral Kane's voice over the comm system. "This is your final warning. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. You have 60 seconds to comply." Vexthera straightened his uniform and activated the communication system. Despite everything that had happened, he was still a war marshal of the Galactic Empire, heir to a military tradition that spanned millennia. He would not beg for mercy from primitives. "Admiral Kane," he replied with as much dignity as he could muster, "I am War Marshal Vexthera, and I do not surrender to inferior species. If you wish to destroy us, then do so. But know that the Empire will send 1,000 fleets to avenge us." Kane's voice carried a note of what might have been respect when he responded. "War Marshal, I understand your position. But you need to understand something about humans. We don't just fight wars, we end them. What you're about to witness is the result of 50 years of human technological development focused on a single goal, making sure that anyone who threatens Earth never gets a second chance. The weapon on the moon began to charge, and every sensor on the Empire flagship screamed warnings about the energy levels being generated. Vexthara watched in fascination and horror as space itself seemed to bend around the massive device. "Sir," his science officer called out frantically, "I'm reading quantum flux patterns that shouldn't be possible. They're manipulating space-time on a macro scale. This technology is centuries beyond anything we possess." The weapon fired. What happened next defied every understanding Vexthara had of physics and warfare. A wave of distorted space-time swept outward from the moon, moving at velocities that made light seem sluggish. When it reached the Empire fleet, ships didn't explode or disintegrate. They simply ceased to exist, erased from reality as the quantum field collapsed their molecular structure down to the subatomic level. In the span of 30 seconds, half of his remaining fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, gone, as if they had never existed at all. "Status of the weapon," Vexthara asked quietly. "Sir, it's charging for another shot. At this rate, they can eliminate our entire remaining force in less than 10 minutes. Vexthara closed his 4 eyes and tried to process what he was experiencing. The humans hadn't just defeated his fleet, they had revealed capabilities that redefined what was possible in galactic warfare. The weapon he had just witnessed was beyond anything the Empire's greatest scientists had ever theorized. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Kane. He's requesting a private communication." "Put it through." Kane's face appeared on the screen, and Vexthara was surprised to see that the human looked almost sympathetic. "War Marshal," Kane began, "I'm going to tell you something that your Empire needs to understand. This system, this planet, is under the protection of a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history fighting for survival. We've faced ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and countless wars among ourselves. Each challenge made us stronger, more adaptable, more determined." Vexthara listened in silence as the human admiral continued. "Your empire has conquered through technological superiority and overwhelming force. You've never faced an opponent that could match your technology and exceed your determination. You've never fought a species that views extinction as merely another problem to solve through innovation and sacrifice." On cue, more human ships began to emerge from concealment throughout the system. Vexthara realized with dawning horror that what he had thought was the entire human fleet had actually been just a fraction of their forces. Hundreds of additional vessels appeared, each one bristling with weapons that defied conventional understanding. "How many ships do you have?" Vexthara asked quietly. Kane smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "War Marshal, every shipyard in human space has been working at maximum capacity for 5 years. Every asteroid has been mined, every industrial facility converted to military production. When we learned that the Empire was coming, we didn't just prepare to defend ourselves. We prepared to make sure that no one would ever threaten Earth again." The scope of human preparation was becoming clear to Vexthara. They hadn't just built a fleet. They had transformed their entire civilization into a military machine focused on a single goal. The level of coordination and sacrifice required was staggering. "But why?" he asked. "Why go to such extremes for one small world?" Kane's expression became serious. "Because, War Marshal, this isn't just our world. It's our home. And humans have a very simple philosophy about home. No one takes it from us. Ever." The weapon on the moon was charging again, its energy readings climbing toward levels that made Vexthara's instruments malfunction. He realized that his next decision would determine not just the fate of his remaining ships, but possibly the future of the Empire itself. "Admiral," he said finally, "what are your terms?" Kane leaned back in his chair, studying the alien commander for a long moment. "Unconditional surrender. Your surviving ships will be escorted to a prisoner facility where your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions. In exchange, I'll allow one ship to return to Empire space carrying a message." "What message?" Kane's smile returned, cold as the void between stars. "That the age of easy conquest is over. That there's a new power in the galaxy, one that learned to fight by surviving the unsurvivable. Tell your empire that Earth stands ready to defend not just itself, but any world that asks for our protection against conquest and enslavement. Vexthera looked around his ruined bridge, at the faces of his surviving crew members, at the tactical display showing the overwhelming force arrayed against them. For the first time in his military career, he was faced with an enemy that didn't just want to defeat him. They wanted to make his defeat meaningful. "I accept your terms," he said quietly. As the human fleet moved to surround his surviving ships, Vexthera realized that he would indeed carry a message back to the Empire. But it wouldn't be a warning about human weapons or tactics. It would be something far more dangerous. The knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, a species had emerged that possessed the most terrifying weapon of all, the absolute refusal to surrender their freedom, no matter the cost. Admiral Zephyr Kane stood in his ready room aboard the ESS Indomitable, looking out at the debris field that had once been the Galactic Empire's 7th Conquest Fleet. Scattered among the wreckage, human recovery ships worked tirelessly to rescue survivors and salvage technology that would help humanity prepare for whatever came next. The battle was over, but Kane knew that the real war was just beginning. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission, and he turned to see the holographic form of President Chun materializing in his quarters. The leader of the United Earth government looked exhausted but determined, her expression carrying the weight of decisions that would shape humanity's future. "Admiral," she began without preamble, "congratulations on your victory. The entire world is celebrating, but I need to know, what happens now? The Empire won't ignore this defeat." Kane nodded grimly. "No, they won't. War Marshal Vexthera's ship departed the system 3 hours ago carrying our message to the Empire leadership. Within a few months, they'll know exactly what happened here. The question is how they'll respond." Through his viewport, Kane could see the massive lunar weapon platform that had sealed the Empire's fate. The device was already being powered down and concealed once again, but its brief appearance had fundamentally altered the balance of power in known space. Humanity had announced itself not just as another species struggling for survival, but as a force capable of challenging the greatest military power in the galaxy. "Sir," came a voice from his bridge crew, "we're receiving a priority transmission from deep space. It's encrypted using protocols we've never seen before." Kane exchanged glances with President Chun before responding. "Put it through to my ready room." The holographic display shifted, revealing the image of a being unlike anything in the Empire's client species database. It appeared to be reptilian, with scales that shifted color in complex patterns, and eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in perfect English, but there was something in its tone that suggested great age and careful consideration. "Greetings, Admiral Kane of the human species," the being began. "I am Speaker Yithmoran of the Free Worlds Alliance. We have been monitoring your conflict with the Empire, and we are impressed by your capabilities." Kane felt a chill run down his spine. The Free Worlds Alliance was mentioned in the Empire's military databases as a terrorist organization, a collection of rebel species that occasionally caused minor disruptions to Imperial operations. The fact that they had been monitoring the battle suggested that humanity's actions had attracted attention from across the galaxy. "Speaker Yithmoran," Kane replied carefully, "I wasn't aware that the Alliance had interests in this sector of space." The alien scales rippled in what might have been amusement. "Admiral, when a species single-handedly destroys an Empire conquest fleet, it becomes of interest to everyone who values freedom in the galaxy. Your victory today has sent shockwaves through every star system from here to the galactic core." President Chen leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Speaker?" "An alliance," Yithmoran replied simply. "For too long, the Empire has expanded unchecked because no single species possessed the capability to stand against them. But humans have proven that the Empire can be defeated, that their technology and tactics can be overcome by determination and innovation." Kane studied the alien's expression, trying to read the subtle color changes in its scales. What would such an alliance entail? Mutual defense, shared technology, coordinated resistance against Imperial expansion, Yithmoran explained. The alliance consists of 47 species across 38 star systems, all united by our refusal to kneel to the Empire. With human capabilities added to our coalition, we could do more than simply resist. We could liberate worlds that have suffered under imperial occupation for centuries. The implications were staggering. Humanity had entered the galactic stage planning only to defend Earth, but now they were being offered a chance to help free entire civilizations from imperial rule. It was an opportunity that could transform humanity from a regional power to a galactic force for liberation. There's something else you should know, Yithmoran continued. Our intelligence networks indicate that the Empire is already mobilizing a response to your victory. The 3rd and 5th fleets are being recalled from frontier operations. They're planning to return with overwhelming force, not just to conquer Earth, but to make an example of what happens to species that dare resist them. Kane nodded grimly. He had expected as much. The Empire couldn't allow humanity's victory to inspire other species to rebellion. They would return with everything they had, determined to crush any hope of successful resistance. How long do we have? President Chen asked. 6 months, perhaps 7, Yithmoran replied. They're assembling the largest fleet in Imperial history, over 5,000 ships under the command of Supreme War Marshal Korath himself. Kane whistled softly. Korath was a legend in Imperial military circles, the architect of a dozen major conquests, and the Empire's most successful commander. If the Empire was sending him, they were treating the human threat with deadly seriousness. Admiral, Yithmoran continued, I won't pretend that the Alliance can match the Empire ship for ship, but we can offer something potentially more valuable, knowledge. We know their supply lines, their strategic weaknesses, their political divisions. Combined with human tactical innovation and weapons technology, we might be able to accomplish something that hasn't been possible for 1,000 years. Which is? President Chen asked. Yithmoran's scales shifted to a deep blue pattern that somehow conveyed fierce determination. The complete defeat of an Imperial core fleet. A victory so decisive that it would inspire rebellions across the galaxy and potentially trigger the Empire's collapse. The ready room fell silent as the magnitude of the speaker's proposal sank in. Humanity had won a single battle through careful preparation and superior tactics, but what was being suggested was nothing less than galactic revolution. I need to discuss this with my government and military leadership, President Chun said finally. Of course, Yithmoran replied. But understand that time is not our ally. The Empire's response fleet will arrive whether we are prepared or not. The question is whether humanity will face them alone or as part of a galactic coalition dedicated to ending imperial tyranny forever. The transmission ended, leaving Kane and President Chin alone with the weight of decisions that would determine not just humanity's future, but the fate of countless civilizations across the galaxy. What do you think, Admiral? Chin asked quietly. Kane looked out at the debris field where the Empire's fleet had met its end, thinking about the courage and sacrifice that had made this victory possible. Human pilots had died among those asteroids. Engineers had worked for years to prepare the defenses that had saved Earth, and countless men and women had devoted their lives to ensuring that humanity could stand against the galaxy's greatest power. Madam President, he said finally, when humans first looked up at the stars, we dreamed of exploration and discovery. When we learned that the galaxy was full of life, we hoped for friendship and cooperation. When we discovered that the Empire was coming to enslave us, we prepared to fight for our freedom. He turned to face her directly. But now we have the chance to do something more. We can fight not just for ourselves, but for every species that dreams of freedom. We can take the strength we've built and use it to light a fire of liberation that spreads across the galaxy. President Chun smiled, and Kane could see the resolve forming in her expression. Then, we'd better get to work, Admiral. If we're going to take on the Empire's core fleet in 6 months, we'll need every advantage we can get. As the president's hologram faded, Kane looked back out at the stars that surrounded Earth. Somewhere out there, Supreme War Marshal Korath was assembling the most powerful military force in galactic history. But he was also about to learn something that every would-be conqueror in human history had discovered to their cost. Humanity was never more dangerous than when it was fighting for something bigger than itself. The Empire had come to Earth expecting to crush another primitive species. Instead, they had awakened a force that would shake the foundations of their thousand-year dominion. The age of imperial expansion was ending. The age of human liberation had begun. In the months that followed, Earth would become the center of the greatest military buildup in galactic history. Ships from 47 Alliance worlds would arrive to join the human fleet, bringing technologies and tactics that would revolutionize warfare. Human engineers would work alongside alien scientists to create weapons that defied conventional understanding, while human tacticians would develop strategies that would rewrite military doctrine across the galaxy. When Supreme War Marshal Karath arrived with his massive fleet, he would find not just a defended world, but the birth of an alliance that would change the galaxy forever. He would learn, as the Empire was learning throughout their territories, that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their absolute refusal to accept that freedom was anything less than the birthright of every sentient being in the universe. And they were prepared to fight, die, and sacrifice everything to ensure that birthright was protected. The Empire had come to Earth seeking conquest. They had instead sparked a revolution that would echo through the stars for generations to come.